Okay, let's get started. So we're playing a 10 plus 5. Normally I play 10 plus 0 during streams and stuff, but I think it would be wise to try not to get flagged, especially since I'm gonna be thinking out loud and stuff. Okay, took a while to get the bearing, but here we go. Let's get into it. Okay, so we're gonna be playing an Italian, right? And the way I play it is with c3 and d3. Now the pawn is being attacked, so we need to go d3 immediately. Bishop e7. So this is one of the two choices that black usually makes here regarding that bishop. Sometimes you see the fianchetto, but it's not really common. I think bishop e7 and bishop c5. Probably bishop c5 is the most popular, and then bishop e7. And what should we do here? We could still carry on with bishop b3, just retreating so that d5 doesn't come with a tempo. We could also just short castle, and I think I'm just gonna go for short castling to be principial. Okay, and they did d6, so they're not really planning on playing d5 into tempies. Um, so let's continue with our plan of playing c3. Now, if the knight tries to take our bishop, we can try to maneuver it and avoid giving it up. Okay, and that's actually what they went for. Um, So let's give the check. And now if bishop d7, we're probably going to trade. And if c6, we can just retreat this way. And yeah, they gained a bunch of tempies, but I don't think that that is something to be too concerned about. Like now already this knight on a5 is a bit short on squares. So I'm thinking that if they play bishop b7, for example, b4 is just straight up trapping the knight. Um, we could start with b4 and send the knight to b7. Then the knight is going to have a hard time developing itself out of that square. We could also play a4 to try to provoke him into taking and then split up his pawns. Um, a4, I guess they're going to play a6, right? We don't need to rush into taking. We can just keep the tension for a little bit longer. Um, okay, and yeah, let's give a4 a try. Let's see how they respond. So the idea here is that if they take on a4, we get the open a file, and these pawns are split up from the a pawn, which means that a7 is an isolated pawn. But like I said, I'm full on expecting black to play a6 or even something else because the pawn on b5 was not actually attacked. Okay, so the bishop went to d7. Now we could develop our dark squared bishop, we could develop our knight, we could put our rook on e1. I like all of these moves. Um, we could also play h3 to put the bishop on e3 and not have to deal with knight to g4. Um, we could also play d4. Like we have options here. d4, maybe I like it a little bit less with this knight on a5 because I'm giving them knight c4. Even though b3, knight goes back to b6. Um, okay, let's go for it. d4 then. And if they take with the e pawn, we can recapture with the c pawn, and we have a pretty nice center. Okay, queen c7. So we were attacking on e5, and they guarded the pawn, right? Um, Now I think we should develop, and I'm liking bishop g5. I'm also liking rook e1. Um, how do we choose? Well, let's start by bringing out the bishop. And I like the fact that now the knight on f6 is pinned. And also what I was thinking is that if they decide to play c5 and therefore weaken the d5 square, then we're gonna have the option to give up the bishop for the knight. But okay, for the time being, we can just retreat. And we mustn't forget about this knight on b1. Okay, rook e8. That's not threatening anything, so let's play rook e1. And yeah, where is this knight on b1 going? I'm thinking d2. I would like a3, but I also don't see that much of a future um, for that knight. Maybe just with the idea of playing b4, and then if the knight tries to jump on c4, we can take it and worsen his pawn structure. But that would also be fulfilled from d2, to be fair. And then where are we going from d2? Well, maybe we're going to f1. Maybe we're pushing and going to b3. I'm not sure yet, but I'm starting to be more and more convinced of the fact that I will want to play b4 at some point, because it feels like it's really pushing black back, you know? Um but like I said, we shouldn't just do it and allow the knight to find the comfy square on c4. Okay, so knight to h5. Our opponent is offering us a bishop's trade. And at least at first glance, I'm not thrilled about it because this bishop on e7 was being kind of passive. But then at the same time, this bishop is guarding the d6 pawn. So maybe there would be a scenario where that worked in my favor. We also might actually just have a trick here that is just occurring to me, which is that the queen is x-raying the knight on h5, and this is a really typical tactic, right? We take the pawn and then the queen recaptures the knight. It happens a lot, especially in these pawn structures. Of course, we have to first get rid of the bishop, so I'm thinking trade and knight takes e5. And they don't have any tempes with the knight because we can also just kind of save our knight by taking the bishop. And if they take with the rook to guard the knight, that just doesn't work because we take the rook. Um, so honestly, I think this is our opportunity to win a pawn, and quite a clean pawn. Maybe we're gonna have some issues, but not even, because knight c4, we played b3. Oh, what was I doing? It's important to take with the knight first, because if we take with a pawn and then try to do the same trick, then either the queen or the rook recaptures, and then they are guarding the h5 square. So we don't really want that. Okay. This is probably going to take our opponent by surprise. So I'm actually expecting, oh, I was gonna say I'm expecting them to take a little bit of time here, but no, no problem. So let's take our knight back, right? And now we're a pawn up. We still need to win the game, but doing pretty good so far. But we should definitely prioritize the development of the knight on b1. So we were being cute until now, but now black really has developed all their pieces and we still haven't moved the knight on b1. So we have a long-term advantage, right? The extra pawn, we have a good center, so we have no reason not to prioritize finishing our development. Okay, we gotta take back. Now I'm expecting some pressure on this d4 pawn. We need to think about how to cope with that, because we can't really play d5 because the rook on e1 is hanging, which is related to us not developing the knight on b1. Okay, so knight's hitting the pawn. Um, and honestly, we could just play b3. I would have liked to have that diagonal for my bishop, but I think it just makes sense to kick out the knight. And there are going to be other opportunities in the game. Plus, this bishop might also find something cool to do on that diagonal. Okay, now let's not rush into playing e5, but instead let's develop our knight. And now there's also knight c3, which is available, and I wish we could have done something like takes and knight c3 jumping on d5. Unfortunately, we can't because knight c3 would be hanging. Um, and if we start with knight c3 now, there is going to be b4 and we have to move the knight again. So I think it's gonna have to be knight to d2, but maybe we can bring it back to f3 and kind of give it a job in defending the d4 pawn, or maybe jumping on e5. So let's just do knight d2. And we have our eyes on e5, but we don't need to rush. Also, taking on b5 next move would make our d pawn a passer because it wouldn't have any adjacent pawns to try to stop its advancement, right? So I didn't want to do it before because, like I said, I just wanted to make sure that I'm finishing my development. Um, but from now, this is something to consider, taking on b5 and then knowing that these pawns are going to be really, really mobile. And of course, we're also opening up the A file. Okay, so I think black is trying to reroute to f6 with the knight. That's probably what they're going for. I'm not particularly impressed by this because we could just play e5, right? And if they play c5 to try to break our pawns up, then we can even just keep on pushing, which is pretty pretty beautiful. Um, the other alternative is just to take, and we gotta be careful because the bishop is hanging. So we would move the bishop, then we would allow knight f6. Um, yeah, maybe I'm being petty, but honestly, I don't really want to allow knight to f6. Because like I said, c5, we push again, we're threatening a fork. And queen b6 hitting the pawn, now the knight reroutes to f3. Okay, bishop e6. So I think now we can trade. And we have to do something with this bishop. One idea that I had here was to play bishop e4, even though I would also maybe like that square for the knight. Um, we could also play rook c1 and we're threatening some kind of bishop h7 check. Um, I don't love the fact that I'm no longer looking at the a7 pawn with the rook, but this pawn is like black's most protected piece, to be honest. So I think we can spare the rook being on a1 for a little bit. And I like this move more than bishop e4 because bishop e4 was inviting them to develop a piece. Okay, so they moved the queen out of the way. Now one idea that we might have is just queen f3. They move the rook, queen e4 with threatened checkmate, and they're gonna have to play g6 basically. Um, and then that would lead to, well, this square was already weak, but that would lead to f6 becoming a weak square as well. One thing to keep in mind is that queen f3, they have bishop d5, which is a little bit annoying. We would play queen d3, they would play g6, but it's a slightly worse version than what I would have wanted, I think. Okay, so we've actually identified an important thing here, which is that black is going to try to blockade us on light squares as a consequence of the way we push the pawns. Um, so 94 doesn't work here because we're dropping the pawn. Even though I don't know, it looks so good. It almost looks like I could just give it up. Or we could just go knight f3 um and guard the pawn. There's also queen h4 with the idea of queen e4 and at the same time guarding the rook. If I'm having a hard time deciding and we're low on the clock. So I should just go with something. I should just go with something. Um, okay, let's go with queen f3. I'm starting to see a problem, which is rook d8 hits the pawn, but I think we still have time, like rook d8, bishop, queen e4, queen d3. And, well, let's go to d3. We're threatening. Okay, now they did g6, and now we can play knight f3. And we've guarded everything. We did kind of allow bishop f5 though, but it's fine. Like if we trade, maybe what actually happens is that they loosen the grip on light squares and we can start preparing d5. Okay, knight g7, so he's coming to f5. That's a bit annoying. Um Okay, I like queen e3 here. Let's just get out of the way. We're hitting the pawn, and they can't play knight f5 because we just take it and take the pawn. Uh, and after king h7, yeah, after king h7, uh, okay. I thought, but now knight f5 is a threat. I mean, a threat. Okay, I think we can just guard the pawn and knight f5 would just move the queen. Bishop d5, okay. Um, I think they're making room for the knight to jump into e6. I think that's the plan. We could play bishop e4 and trade. Um, I also like queen f4, improving a little bit the queen, but then that just walks into knight e6, and if we go to h4, we're not really threatening anything. So this makes me think more and more that maybe we should just trade bishops. I also like h4, h5, making this knight, trying to force it to stay there, but then h4, maybe they try to infiltrate with the queen. Okay, let's play h3 just to make a loop for the king, and then maybe also keep an eye out for g4 to just lock this knight in. If it tries to jump into f5, and of course we already know that it might go to e6. Okay, knight f5. So let's move the queen out of here. I shouldn't forget about my pawn on b3, by the way, because then black's gonna have connected passed pawns on the queen side. We don't want that. Okay, now he decided to take. And I guess the issue is that when I take, there's knight takes d4. That seems strange though. Like that seems like maybe it shouldn't work just because they are so pinned on that file. So queen f3, knight takes d4. Let's say queen back to e4. How do they keep the knight? Like knight e2 doesn't work because we just take. Knight c2, okay, but we take the queen. And I mean, I guess it's gonna take us a while to take that knight, but maybe not even queen e4. Maybe just rook e4. No, actually, sorry, the queen's guard. The queen's attacked. Okay, let's take, because I didn't think that taking with that pawn was an option. And I think he's starting to doubt. Okay, no, never mind, no doubts. Our opponent is decisive. So let's go queen e4. We're pinning the knight. And how do they unpin here? Maybe queen d5, but we don't have to do anything. We could just play like rook e3, trying to double up. And if they take, we take back with the rook. Okay, queen c7. Oh, that's actually so freaking clever. I'm so mad. Because if we take, we lose the c2 bishop. That is so clever. Okay, so that's not great. If we move the bishop, we lose the pin. Okay, I think we gotta go for it and try to see if we have any activity once they take on c2 with something like queen d6. Queen d6, queen c7. Off. Queen b4 hits the pawn, hits the rook. I don't know. Queen d6 looked more active. Maybe queen d8. Queen b4 makes me feel like I just got greedy to take my extra pawn back. But okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed with the way the events of the game transpired. But now we're in a new position and we need to mentally adjust to that. And the black king is still a little bit weaker. Like if anything, just because the momentum doesn't feel as much in our favor as it was before, because we were a pawn up and everything. But this doesn't mean that we're losing. Like it feels like, it feels like a defeat that we used to have a better position, but it's important to not let that cloud our judgment of this new position, which is not so bad. Like, we'll see how it goes. I think my opponent is also taking some time readjusting. So you have to move the rook, or maybe they're gonna go back to c7, but then we take on b5. Maybe they're gonna go rook b7. Now, basically what I would want is to get e6. Because I think that would allow me to get the rook in and then maybe checks on the 7th, maybe pressure on the 6th. And I'm actually starting to appreciate my queen on b4 more for the fact that there is no queen c1, queen f4 idea, which is so typical when the white king is short castle, right? So we black or whatever has these ideas all the time to try to do a perpetual or to try to weaken the king. And my queen is preventing that. So kudos to my queen. And of course, I'm talking about the scenario where I have to go up with my rook. What else can they do? Um, Maybe rook d7, so like queen takes b5, they try to trade. But I don't think that should be too bad. Then we're a pawn up in that endgame. Of course, still a lot to play ahead, but maybe black wouldn't voluntarily want to trade into that. Or maybe rook d7, queen b5, rook d2 to try to put pressure on the second rank, which is kind of annoying. Um, I guess we could be really passive, just play rook f1 and then argue that we're gonna infiltrate with the queen. That's one option, and actually maybe the only one option, just because the queen doesn't have any squares to guard the f2 pawn. But I don't think that's too bad. Like rook d7, queen b5, rook d2, rook f1. Okay, they moved. No, no, they didn't move. For some reason, I thought that my clock changed. Okay, they've taken quite some time in this situation. I'm actually surprised. I mean, they do have a lot of extra time, so it makes sense for them to use it, but it's also important for them to keep their time advantage. In a way, I feel like them taking so much to make their move is kind of making me lose like focus and determination. Just because I started speaking about this position from the perspective of my mouse being super like tight on the no, sorry, my hand being super tight on my mouse, to be ready to not like lose any seconds the moment they make a move, and now now I'm feeling like less alert. So maybe it's a strategy. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the analysis of this game. I'm starting to think that maybe we rushed into playing e5 just because black's like blockade on light squares felt really natural for them. Okay, here we go. Rook b5. So they decided to guard. And here, what did I say? I said e6. And to be honest, I don't have that much time to begin with, so let's go for it. And they decided to take. They don't have any nasty checks. They don't have any nasty checks. Like rook c1, king h2, queen c7. Sorry, queen c1, king h2, queen c7. We can just play g3. Like, that's fine. And of course, queen c1, if we get scared, we can also just bring the rook back to e1, which might not even be so bad since we're kind of winning a tempo. Yeah, actually, I think I'm just gonna do that. Rook f7. Okay, they're hitting the pawn. And if I go queen d4, maybe I lose this one here, but maybe I have rook e8 to try to go for that square. So let's go queen d4. Now queen c1, they could force a trade. Then we're gonna have check and pick up the pawn on b7, and then rook b4. Okay, check. We gotta go for it. Are they gonna trade? No, queen c7. Okay, so g3. Now we actually need to be extra careful because of the f2 pawn. And now queen d7 offering a trade. Um, all right, let's just go back to e3. Wow, this position is actually so weird. Now I'm feeling less happy. Like, it's so symmetrical, but still so weird. I'm feeling less happy about my king now, but maybe what I will try to do is hit the pawn on h5 and force some kind of concession. Okay, queen b7. So let's go rook e4. We're also blocking the queen's diagonal. And rook h4 is my idea. And g5, they weaken this diagonal. h5, which is probably better. Okay, queen d7. They're not threatening anything, so let's just go for it. And h5, I might just return to e4 or to d4. Because g4 is way too risky. Okay, g5 was played. Let's go rook d4. Now, like I said, this diagonal is weak. But also, I shouldn't forget about guarding my pawn. Nope, nope, let's not give up the pawn. That'd be crazy. How about queen to c2? I'm not feeling this move. Because now queen f6, we gotta drop back with the rook to d2. Just because it's hitting both the pawn and the rook. I can't just like move the king. Okay. They're starting to be queen e1. They're hitting the pawn that way. I mean, okay, let's go rook d2. We are going to have some checks very soon. Um, okay, so let's give a check. And rook f6, are we going to trade? Or shall we try to be courageous? Let's try to see if we can force a trade with the king on like g1. Queen a1 check, we go to g2. Queen f5. So let's give it another check. Let's give another check. If they block with the rook, now we take the pawn. King to g6. Okay, so now honestly, let's just try rook d7. This is probably not good. Queen b1, king g2, queen e4, king. Okay, so the problem is that they're gonna have this. Oh no, wait, no, they don't have that. My queen's on a7. Okay, we're good. King h2. I'm going to h2, so there are no checks. Now we're threatening to take him out with the king. Queen e4. Let's give the check. They went out that way. Let's give another check just because I'm so low on the clock. Checks are everything I'm seeing. Let's give another check. Is this too insane? Oh, but now we have rook e7. Okay, finally our efforts paid off. Here we go. Uh and I don't think this was good because now the rook is also attacked. I mean, they have rook f6 maybe, but I think taking the pawn made their job harder. Okay, so we could take the queen. Do we have any extra stuff? I'm not seeing any. Okay. And now off we go with the checks again. They block that way. Let's bring the king now that they're pinned. Wow, I'm actually so thrilled that I'm gonna be playing this whole thing with 16 seconds. but I mean better than flagging. Um, okay, let's bring the king once more. And here we go. King there. Okay, I kind of walked into that. Let's not blunder queen e4. That would be insane. Let's not blunder that. Okay, let me just push a pawn. This rook is so good at like freaking guarding. Okay, let's give this check here. They went there. Let's give this check here. And here. And now let's try to infiltrate a bit more with our king. And here we go. Queen to c6. Check. Um, okay, check again. He went to b6. This looks like it just blundered checkmate in one, which is such a relief because this we were gonna win this, but it was gonna take forever. But queen to b8 check just saves the day. Okay, what a game, what a game. I'm actually so grateful that I won because yeah, it was starting to feel a bit sad that I was a pawn up and I had that beautiful center and I was really feeling it. But this is often how it goes. Like you start feeling good about your position, you start thinking only about the things that you can do and less about the things they can do, and then you lose a little bit the advantage or you lose the entire advantage. But then because psychologically you're kind of frustrated, you make the resulting position like worse than it actually is in your head, and that also introduces bias. So yeah, it's a whole thing, but not this time. We readjusted to the position. It was definitely equal for a while, and we just kind of shuffled in a way that worked for us. So yeah, let's get into the analysis. Okay, so now let's use the Leech's game analysis tool to have a look at what actually happened in this game. So first of all, I'm seeing what seems to be a really good sign or a pretty good sign, which is this graph of the game. So this is literally showing that during this game, we were never in trouble. Did we mess up a few times and throw away the advantage? Yes, and we're gonna see that. But the fact that I was never in trouble is really encouraging. It did kind of feel that way, right? But it's really encouraging because it meant that there never was a moment where my opponent, if only they had found one specific move, I would have been lost. And this feels good if nothing else. Okay, so let's see what happened. So the opening was pretty standard. We actually followed pretty much the main some of the main lines. So here, like I was saying during the game as well, bishop c5 is much more common than the bishop e7 setup. Um, Here we did d3. We have bishop e7 second most popular, short castling, d6, c3, and now here they play knight a5, which is not as common as simply short castling, but it is a move that was played by at least some grandmasters. And here we went for bishop c5, so we didn't want to give up the light squared bishop. That's why we went for this whole maneuver. And oops, they didn't play bishop d7. I was just following with the book. They played c6. So when I'm saying that I didn't want to give up the light squared bishop, of course, I know that after bishop b7, bishop d7, bishop b5, bishop d7, I have to trade. I'm talking more about the giving up the light squared bishop for the knight and therefore giving black the bishop pair and stuff. So I'm not just gonna, I don't know, like sacrifice. There's actually absolutely no way. Even if I sacrifice my queen, I still wouldn't avoid the trade of light squared bishops here. Okay, so anyway, c6, bishop back to a4, b5, bishop to c2, short castling, and here I went a4, and a4 was actually really good. I'm happy about this. If you remember, during the game I was also considering b4. This is also a good move, so I guess the appeal of this move is that we are pushing the black knight into b7, and now the knight on b7 is going to need some energy for black in order to, activate itself on a better square. And now the move that the computer wants is still a4. So, and this is an idea that has multiple benefits. So we are threatening to open up the a file, which might give us pressure in the long run. But also, if black takes, this is really bad because the pawn gets separated. Okay, so a4, bishop d7, d4, queen to c7, bishop g5. So far, so good. Here's the eval bar. h6. Now we went bishop h4. They went rook e8. We went rook e1. And here they denied h5, which was an inaccuracy. I would even say, actually, I don't know what the limits are between inaccuracies and mistake. But the point is, they allowed us to do a trick and win a pawn, which is what we did, right? So keep an eye out for this kind of ideas for both white and black. This type of tactical pattern occurs in many situations. So here after knight h5, we traded and we won the pawn. And now we just have a really good position. So we're a pawn up, we have a beautiful center, we have active-ish pieces. We still need a little bit of investment to get that knight into the game, but we're like right there. And we have an extra pawn without black getting any compensation. Like their knight is still in the middle, the bishop is not particularly active. So like oftentimes, when the opponent loses a pawn, they try to get some kind of compensation in return, but here black hasn't really obtained anything. Okay, so knight c4, b3, the knight went back. Here we went knight d2, knight d8, and e5. And I don't know if you recall, but during the game I started to have doubts about this move just because later on we had all those situations with bishop e6, bishop d5. But this was actually not a mistake. So, in a way, like the first instinct that I had, which is that opening up this diagonal, really nailing it, this knight on e8, like that knight is so bad at the moment. Of course, black later on activated it and that was good, but at least at the moment, this was good. So computer is like, yep, well done. I don't know how you screwed up later, but this was not the reason for that screw up. So bishop 8 e6, a takes b5, kind of an inaccuracy, so the computer is saying just go ahead with the knight, improve your position, bring the rook. But okay, we took, this is still fine. Here we brought the rook in, queen to d7, queen to f3, rook to d8, queen to d3, pawn to g6, knight to f3, knight to g7, queen to e3, king to h7 guarding the h6 pawn, and rook c to d1, bishop d5, and here I played h3, which is an inaccuracy. And I don't know if you remember, but during the live game, I was starting to feel a little bit like, I thought I was gonna crush him more than I'm actually crushing him. And because I was low on time or starting to get low on time, I just wanted to make a move. And I thought that it was going to be, like a useful move in the long run. And well, this wasn't the best move. It's not bad, but you can kind of immediately see that I was starting to run out of steam. I made a move that wasn't that connected with what was going on the board, and I dropped a little bit of advantage, but this was not the problem. After knight f5, queen to f4, um, queen to f4, knight takes f3, queen takes f3, knight takes d4, I lost my pawn. So instead of allowing this whole thing, the computer just says, yeah, take the knight and enter this position where you have the knight versus bishop, but then you still have an extra pawns. What I thought during the game was I thought that it was going to be difficult to dislocate this bishop on d5 in order to push my pawn. Now, from what I'm seeing from the engine lines, the plan that the computer wants for white that actually makes a lot of sense, and I highlighted during the game at some point, but then I kind of forgot about it, is placing a knight on f6 because that square is weak. So computer wants knight h2, knight g4, knight f6, and this makes a lot of sense. And I think, like I said, I said that f6 was weak, but then I never got to follow through. And if nothing else, this knight is going to pose a threat to the bishop on d5. Um, but okay, this is not what happened. I was hesitant to give up my bishop, and now we went for this. And after knight takes d4, I was right to believe that this wasn't a very sound setup for black because of the pin, but I punished it in the wrong way. And the correct move versus my move are so painfully similar. But you know how chess is. The smallest details can make the whole difference. So what I played in the game was queen to e4. And my idea was, well, get the queen out of the attack, hit the knight on d4. How do they guard against that? And, if they just start playing random things like, I don't know, a6, then I was hoping that maybe we are going to get some kind of rook e3, even though I'm starting to think now that that just doesn't work. I mean, it keeps on not working for the same reason that it didn't work in the game, which is that when the queen moves to the side, it unpins, and if we try to take the knight, then we lose defense over the c2 bishop. But kind of like ignoring that that was a possibility, then yeah, we would eventually get the double up and the knight would be lost. But of course, this also required like black's cooperation. So queen e4, mistake, because of what happened in the game, which was queen c7. So I thought that black couldn't unpin, but they can, thanks to the queen's counter attack on the bishop. And we'll see what happened next. Now the correct move was queen to f4, and which is like, are you kidding me? So what is the difference? Well, if black tries the same thing, which is literally their only resource for unpinning and not losing their knight in the long run, actually even in the shorter run than my plan of doubling up, because like rook e4 now is possible. But if black tries queen to c7, now we have an extra move, which is we have time to give up the bishop. Well, actually, we don't have an extra move. What we have is the queen no longer blocking the bishop's diagonal. So, for example, rook takes d4. You can't take here because the rook takes there. Rook takes d4. Now we can go bishop takes g6 check, pawn takes g6, queen back to d4, and we won a pawn again. And now the king is weak, the e5 is a passer. So this looks good for white. Of course, we're still gonna have to grind things, but extra pawn, passer, weak king, we have all the chances in the world. So yeah, small little difference here, but quite important. Now, I guess aesthetically, I should have chosen queen f4, like even if I wasn't, calculating this whole thing just on like an aesthetic instinct sort of thing. Maybe it should have looked a little bit ugly to me that I'm putting the queen in the way of the bishop. Oh, one more thing that I wanted to show is if queen f4 and black tries to go knight e6, saying, well, you take my queen, but I take yours. Now, the unfortunate like setting of black's rooks, and in particular the rook not being on e8 but on e7, is causing black's downfall here, because now I can actually just like choose whichever rook I want to take. Okay, so queen e4 in the game, queen c7, really well found from my opponent. So we have this endgame that, surprise, surprise, is equal. So we have the same material. Black has this like 2 versus 1 on the queen side, but of course that needs a lot of preparation. And we have 4 versus 3 on the king side, and maybe a slightly safer king. And now we shuffle. I started with queen b4, which I think I was a bit unhappy with during the game. Like I thought that maybe I should have gone for something like queen d6. Computer is just like, yeah, 0-0 either way. Queen b4, rook b7, e6. Here, e6 was a really good practical chance, I believe, because it was forcing black to weaken their 7th rank. And in fact, this is what ended up winning us the game. But objectively speaking, white shouldn't have anything here because black can just have a fortress where they just guard everything. And well, there's gonna be some passive play involved, but it doesn't have to, lead into checkmate if black is careful. So good practical chance, but the position is still equal. We have queen d4, queen c1, king h2, queen c7, g3, queen d7. I didn't want the trade. How was the end game here? Still equal, but I feel like, yeah, if I'm gonna draw, I feel much safer trying to hold the draw in like a queen versus rook than in this position. Just because I don't know, like black has all of a sudden this two versus one that maybe I need to be careful about. I just feel like rook end games are trickier in general, and yeah, if it's gonna be 0-0, let me have the 0-0 with queens on the board where I feel a little bit safer, and also maybe I have some tricks against the black king. So we kept the queens, queen b7, rook back to e4, so we're shuffling. And now here black should have played h5. And we know, sorry, I know that I thought about this during the game, and I thought that maybe I'm doing a little bit of something inducing this weakness. Still, the computer doesn't think I have anything. I guess part of the reason is that g4, which would be like the natural way to break down black's defenses, is just not really feasible because there's always going to be like checks against my king. So when I'm playing g4, I'm not playing it risk free. I might actually like shoot myself in the foot if I play g4. See, this is already like minus one already. So queen king c7, queen g2, king g2. Now black is saying queen f4. I guess the rook on h4 is weirdly placed now. Um, so yeah, like I said, g4 would be a natural continuation if it wouldn't actually super weaken my king at the same time. But here black did g5. G5 is double question mark. Unfortunately, we did not find, or sorry, I did not find the reason. Um, yeah, I did not find the reason this was such a blunder. I did intuitively feel like this was too much of a weakening, but that was actually not the problem. The problem was just straight up the pawn is hanging. And yeah, I don't know, like rook takes f2 check, you just don't care and you go king g1 and you're hitting the rook and you're threatening to take on h6 with checkmate. So black's best move here is actually to just like start checking you away, but eventually you will hide and you've won a rook. So rook takes h6 is really painful, and of course the king is hitting the rook, and if they don't take, then well, we just want a pawn at least, and the king is weak. So yeah, I have 22 seconds left here, so I will partially excuse myself from not having seen this move. This would definitely have ended things much faster, and yeah, I'm pretty calm about it also because I won the game, right? So I probably would have been like screaming at the walls right now if I had lost or drawn this game and realized that I missed kind of a trivial tactic. But it happens. So rook back to d4. It's a blunder because it's not, like taking the opportunity. And actually, it is, no, it is bugging a little bit. I think maybe it's oscillating between like the X, as in missed opportunity and just straight up blunder. But anyway, bad move. Queen e7. Now we give a bunch more checks, so we have a bunch more shuffling. Um, a bunch more shuffling. Bunch more shuffling. Bunch more shuffling. And here, after rook to d7, okay, check, queen e4. Here, black started to really mess things up. But now, honestly, that I'm thinking about it, I feel like maybe black should have just tried to like avoid this whole con conglomerate of pieces on the seventh rank to begin with, just because the correct move is king h5 here. And I feel like, man, like king h5 is not intuitive, especially in a yeah, he had 9 seconds in a low time situation. Just because you're thinking, well, I don't want to get mated. Where do I get mated? On the side. So let me walk through the center. And this is bad because it actually gave me more access to the king. But king h5 also looks like a very stone cold move to make. And if you try g4, then now the king goes into h4, and look at this, black is winning. Black is winning, like you have no checks. The queen has to keep on guarding this pawn, so you can't just like chill out. And if you play a random move, now rook f3 is threatening to take on h3, and black is mating. Like, this is insane. So wow, and I definitely feel like I would have fallen for it just because we were in such a low time control stressful situation. I do feel like I would have fallen for g4 because it's also kind of automatic. Um, but yeah, pretty crazy that g4 is straight up winning for black. Like, rook f3 is a threat. The queen has to guard the pawn. Absolutely, absolutely incredible how this king is just like dominating the white king. So yeah, we really dodged a bullet here when black went king f5. Like, not only is this a blunder for them, but also it didn't give me the opportunity to make a blunder with g4. So here we have queen d7 check. They blocked with the queen. We went g4 now, and they went king f5, king e5, which allowed them to get skewered or pinned and allowed us to win a queen. Now, I thought that they were going to go king f4 here, and I was actually not sure. Again, 17 seconds on the clock, but I was not sure how things were going to continue here. I would have definitely given a check just because that's kind of what we were doing, giving checks. And apparently this is forced checkmate for white in 19 moves. So yeah, no hope of calculating. But first off, you can't go queen e4 because your rook hangs, right? So you have to move the king. You go to f3. And now the move that the computer is suggesting is not like continuing to check and just try to checkmate with only your queen. That's not going to work. But rather bring the rook back to d7. And now you're going to have ideas of checks with the queen and the rook guarding each other. But you're also bringing back the rook from g7 because it served its purpose on g7, right? So this is an important like concept to remember, that you send the piece somewhere, but you can't just like forget that that piece might need to come back or just like transfer on a different side of the board because it fulfilled whatever you sent it to do in the first place. And what's the idea of rook d7? Well, if they just play randomly, and it's kind of hard for them to make a move, but if they just play something random, then now we give queen d1 check. And if the king goes to e4, then there is like a checkmate this way, which is really beautiful, the cooperation between these two pieces. Or if they take this pawn, now we have a similar idea, but now the king has to walk on e3 and we have a skewer. And here, when the king goes to f4, we don't even take the queen. We actually checkmate. And this is such a pretty checkmate, but because you would expect to have this exact same checkmate, but with like no pieces on the board. But it is with his queen and his rook on the board, just not able to help in any way. And if they block with the queen here, then we have rook d3 check. If you take on f2, then there is at least rook d2 with a skewer. And yeah, if they go this way, then we just take the queen for free. And yeah, I don't know what else black could do here. So after rook d7, if they try to be a little bit more proactive with like rook f4, they actually get mated even faster because the rook is taking away the king's f4 square. So after queen d1, if king to e4, then I think queen d3, king e5, and queen c3. Oh my god, king e4, rook d4. That's probably not the fastest mate, but you get the vibe, mates. Um, And yeah, and if king takes f2, we have the same idea, but this checkmate one move earlier because there is no king to f4. So yeah, pretty cool stuff going on here. We got the slightly less cool, but less calculation intense as well, which was rook to e7. So we won the queen. And now we just have to grind down this endgame. And for a while, it did look like maybe we weren't making progress, but it's important to know that this kind of position, it is supposed to take a while, just because, the imbalance is not completely crazy. So you just like, queen versus rook, king versus king, you just pick up all the pawns, but it's also just winning. Like black doesn't have like a counter attack idea or anything. Of course, there are some situations where you have imbalances where black can put up a fortress, but that was not really the case here, and it's very rarely the case with king versus rook as well. Like maybe king, rook, and minor piece way more common, but just king and rook usually just like the queen and the king, they just manage to grind down by either like winning some of the flank pawns and then promoting a new queen, or you always have the idea of just like giving up the queen for the rook and then converting into a king and pawns endgame that is winning. And you're in control of that because black has to keep their king and rook close to each other. Otherwise, they're just going to be exposing themselves to double attacks and stuff. So you're gonna keep the pieces together, which means that you can maneuver the king in a way where you can calculate the endgame that would result if you sacked your queen. But okay, we have queen c7, so I start bringing my king. I was also trying to just kind of make moves here so that we gain a little bit of time. But this rook is doing a really heroic job at keeping these pawns, but it's not going to work forever. And after queen e5 check, our opponent really gave us the greatest gift of them all, which is checkmate in one move. Which, yeah, was really nice to see. I'm really glad that I saw it, because it made things much nicer and much shorter. Now, if say black had stayed with the king to d7, which was, like another move that they could have played. We could have continued with check. Now the king cannot step in front of the rook because then we just clean up these pawns. So he has to go on the back rank. We come with the king. Let's say he keeps on shuffling. We come with the king again. If the rook leaves, then yeah, we just pick up the pawns. So they have to go here. We hit the king. We hit the rook with the king again. And when they go to e6, look at that. We have the the double attack that we were talking about before, because the king and the rook are no longer close to each other, and otherwise the rook leaves the sixth rank and loses these pawns, and then we just promote. And of course, this is one of the lines that the game could have continued, but the point is that you always are going to have some kind of tricks as long as you do what you're supposed to, like put the queen on a good square, bring the king, and be on the lookout for check and something. Check and something. Um, okay, so this was the game. Let me change it to the checkmate in one move. I really hope you enjoyed. Uh, Definitely glad I won. Please use this video as your kind reminder to introduce some more rapid internet games in your, usual chess routines, because blitz and bullet are great, but rapid is also great. That's all I'm saying. And analyzing your games after rapid is a really helpful tool, and you might have more things to discuss if you play rapid than if you play bullet or blitz, where you're just more likely to make simple mistakes because you have less time. So that's it for today. Let me know in the comments if you liked the video, and I will see you for the next one. Take care.